everybody. My name is Caroline Colas, and I'm the Senior Director of Health and Wellness at the Marlene Meyerson JCC Manhattan. And I just realized that although I did hit record, it wasn't recording.
Oh.
So I want to introduce our topic today again, if you don't mind, and that is on the Positive Psychology Hour. Today we are going to be discussing the ways to use positive psychology in everyday life with Sherry Kelly. This is part one of a two-part series. We'll also meet on Thursday and record that. And we're just going to ask ourselves whether we can code ourselves to become more positive. And Sherry thinks we definitely can, and she's going to show us how to do that. Her bio is in the chat. I put that in. But she is a clinical psychologist, a neuropsychologist with more than 30 years of experience in the field of child development and health psychology. And you didn't miss anything. What we did was we just had a mindfulness moment here.
Yes.
And we also talked about the fact that there's still time to join if anybody is interested in the Certificate in Positive Psychology program. You can join up until Friday, and that's a 9-month program that both Sherry and I have taken and have enjoyed, and what I can't think of a better way to spend the rest of the pandemic.
I was going to tell you, and I did not take the 9-month program. I feel like I did, but I didn't. I took a shorter program, which was a certificate in coaching psychology, and I've had wonderful experiences at 2 other in-person programs at WBI. But I just want to remind people, if you don't have the time right now to spend on SIP, there are fabulous programs that are offered by WBI. One's in coaching. Please go to the website and look at the offerings.
Yeah. And there was a question. There was no handout yet. Thank you for joining us, Margot, and for asking that question. What we do in this series is that we send out the recordings and also the PowerPoints at the end of the week to anyone that has registered.
Oh my goodness. Well, we have a heavy one. So should we start sharing?
Yeah, let's go for it.
I'm going to try to go to share screen, okay?
Yeah.
I am a
technical genius.
I am not a technical genius. I'm an analog woman in a digital world. Here we go. So I want to just kick this off about positive psychology. And when I was entering my practice after going through millennia of schooling in the mid-1990s, Martin Seligman was the president, I believe he was president of APA at the time. And he really said some things that were at the time really kind of avant-garde, shocking. It's fabulous what he said, and we're going to get into that. I really love positive psychology because it is forward-thinking. It kickstarts your life. It's in many ways very relevant to what we've gone through today, where we are with the need of trying to move forward and not wallow in the negativity of where we have been. I think it's very practical. So I'm going to start off just understanding what we're going to take away with us in our 2-part series, or just today, if you can just join us for today. I want to leave you with an understanding of the key concepts of positive psychology. What is it? How can you apply it? The understanding of the positive psychology and happiness connection. And that's a big part of what you'll learn if you do a SIP program or if you take anything from WBI. Yes, there is a definite connection between positive psychology and happiness science, the science of happiness. Many of the folks that are in the science of happiness world and instructors and researchers come from positive psychology. And then how can we actually use positive psychology strategies in everyday life, in communicating, problem solving, coping, and relationships? So why should we be concerned, and why is this an important topic? Well, 1 in 4 adults right now has a mental health disorder. COVID has increased the percentage of people who are suffering from depression and anxiety. It's a 90% increase since COVID. That's huge. When you think about our families, our kids, 1 in 5 kids, children and teens has a significant mental health disorder. Less than half of us are able to get treatment for it. And yes, your mental health is worsening during COVID for a variety of reasons. Not just the fact that we're anxious and scared about getting COVID or that we're worried about loved ones, but it's the isolation that is fueling a lot of the mental health disorders that we're seeing. So can we code for a positive future with positive psychology? Yes, we can. This is a great book by Nicholas Carr, by the way. It's called The Shallows, and it's about how the internet and social media and digital technologies affecting our mood and our emotional functioning. That's why I put it up there. It's a great resource. So positive psychology, as opposed to other schools of psychology, like insight-oriented, for example, psychology, positive psychology deals with not the negativity of the past, but how can you utilize your strengths? How can you understand what your strengths are to move you forward? How can we understand what our vision is and our goals are for the future? How can we foster greater resilience? How does growth mindset, Carol Dweck's work, fit into this to move us beyond getting stuck into getting us to be successful in different areas of our lives? How can we be more emotionally and cognitively flexible? As a neuropsychologist, this is what I'm particularly interested in. That cognitive flexibility helps us get over hurdles in life. It helps us grow resiliency. It helps us be happier. One of the things I want to just quote Barbara Fredrickson, who's been with you, Caroline, many times and has been on here. She's a wonderful researcher in positive psychology and resilience. She says positivity opens us. It's the first core truth that positive emotions is that they open our hearts and makes us more receptive and more creative. So there's a real cognitive emotional benefit to being positive. So what is positive psychology? Well, here's a quote by, I call him the father of positive psychology, Martin Seligman. So it's the aim of positive psychology is to catalyze really the change and the positivity of psychology, of moving forward and looking at what we can do rather than a preoccupation of only repairing what's wrong. For many decades, psychology took a diagnostic and almost a medicine model or medical model to psychology and psychiatry of diagnosing and being invested in finding out what's wrong. And it's almost a disease model of psychology. And Seligman kind of turned that on its head. So why is positive psychology beneficial and important, in my opinion? Well, it's the scientific study of what makes life worth living. It's a study of strengths and virtues that enable us to foster more positive communities, more positive relationships. It's founded on the belief that people actually want to lead meaningful and fulfilling lives and to cultivate what's best within each of us. It's to discover and promote the factors that allow us to flourish. So there is actually a predictive power of positivity. And this has actually been studied. I'm just going to give you 3 kind of more recent studies. The level of optimism that people possess is predictive of well-being. Not only physical health, but mental health. And this is the Rosansky research that's very compelling. And a recent study that came out last month from Oregon State shows that there's a predictive power of positivity as you age. So the positive beliefs that you have about aging well and being healthy as you age and being mentally vibrant as you age is actually predictive of you reaching or attaining those goals. So they did this with a group of subjects over the age of 50, and they found out their positive attitude and their hopefulness about aging and their expectations, positive expectations about aging, were actually predictive of them attaining that. And then one of the things we know, which is very important, is that negative thinking is actually linked or associated with greater cognitive decline as you age. We don't want that. We want to be vibrant and healthy. So this is a recent study of fMRI using functional magnetic resonance imaging. And what they did was they scanned people while they were receiving different types of coaching. One type of coaching was more negative, what you have to fix, and narrow in focus. And one was more positive, a more compassionate style of coaching. And they found, no surprise, that the compassionate, positive style of coaching activated the brain in areas associated with big picture thinking, visioning, motivation, and stress regulation. So one of the things that Seligman shared with us as knowledge is that also that you're not stuck, you're not entrenched. Like personality psychology really investigates how your personality was formed, and that this is you're kind of set in your personality, and that's sort of old-fashioned thinking. We now know, because of our science of neuroplasticity, that habits of thinking not need be forever. One of the most significant findings of positive psychology is that you can choose the way that you think. You have more power over your thought processes than you realize. And that's one of the things we're going to explore, is how to cultivate those positive thoughts and cognitions so it can enact change to make your life more healthy. So I don't want people to confuse this of what has now been coined toxic positivity. Okay. It's not the Pollyanna type of thinking of looking at everything through rose-colored glasses. That's not what it is. For you to just know what are some signs of toxic positivity, this is not dismissing or invalidating feelings. Being positive and helping you to be positive is not dismissing what happened in your past or the trauma and challenges you've had to overcome. It's not. It's appreciating it, embracing it, learning from it, moving on with it. It's understanding that we have an important perspective to validate and acknowledging what your experiences have been. It's not dismissing what you've been through. This is almost a century-old quote from Mahatma Gandhi, but it's very true of what I believe positive psychology is about, that you keep your thoughts positive because your thoughts become your words, and your words become your behavior, and your behavior ultimately becomes your habits, and your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. And on a scientific approach, this is what builds and grows your neural networks. And we're going to talk about that also today, your neural networks, and how do you program or code neural networks for being more positive. Well, this is my world. This is what I spend most of my time doing as a neuropsychologist, is walking around the brain and assessing it. So when we're talking about neural networks, the areas of the brain that I really love to explore, particularly is in the front, or in the prefrontal region, the right anterior insula, the medial prefrontal cortex. So when we look at these junctions and areas, it has to do a lot with attention and social interaction, decision-making, planning, initiation, attending to things. Where are we going to move forward? So when we're doing positive psychology, a lot of it is exercising this frontal part of the brain of how we're going to move forward in life, not getting stuck in the muck, but how we're going to go forward. So neural networks are important because we can look at them through an evolutionary lens, right? If you look at how we've evolved, well, the brain's main purpose is actually not to be entertained. It's actually to survive, okay? So that's how we've evolved over millennia, okay? So many of our neural networks are there to help us survive and to maintain sort of a status quo that's safe. Well, that may have worked for us well in the caveman era, but now modern technology and our modern lifestyles demanding different things of our brains. And it's demanding us to be more flexible. The future comes at us faster now than ever before. Well, how do we maintain that flexibility? So neural networks connect our mood, our emotions, our affect, and our responses. We have networks of caution telling us danger up ahead. We have networks of feeling depressed, things that have been ingrained, depressive reactions, depressive modes, or safety modes that might not necessarily be good for us, but we feel safe because they're what we've always done. Our neural networks of how we survive trauma. And then the networks of anxiety, the alarm bells in our brain. So can your cognition, visualizations, behaviors, and responses change our neural networks? Yes, you can. So setting goals for our future, setting goals of what we want is a part of positive psychology. That's the easy part. The hard part is actually achieving those goals. And goals involve behavioral changes. So what's in the way of changing your behavior? And how do you change behaviors using positive psychology? Well, that's one of the takeaways I want you to have through spending time with us today and Thursday. So this is an interesting challenge I have for you. Try saying nothing negative for 24 hours and watch what happens. So tell me on Thursday how that worked out. That's your challenge today. Try saying nothing negative for 24 hours. So these are the three C's of moving towards positive psychology. The 3 C's. Cultivates the first C. Cultivate the positive emotions, experiences, values, strengths, and positive relationships. So not saying anything negative for 24 hours is part of cultivating the positive. Cope effectively with the negative. Learn how to cope with the negative. Can you turn that frown upside down? Can you cope positively with painful experiences and emotions and disappointments? And can you, most importantly, commit to positive change through personally meaningful goals? Can you take sustained action towards achieving those goals? Well, this is Carol Dweck's work. I always put this up because whenever I do a webinar, people love this slide. So I'm giving this again because everyone loves it. Now take screenshots of it. All right. So what do you think? Are you in the growth mindset category or are you in the fixed mindset category? Well, positive psychology tries to build on the growth mindset in the green. It is a flexible mindset, cognitively and emotionally flexible. You can change, you can move, you can adapt. It's about growth. What are you? When we look at the fixed mindset, we see that that is very negative. It's cynical. And unfortunately, we live in a world that fosters the fixed mindset a lot, especially through social media. It's this all or nothing mindset. And we live in a world where we're asked to swipe left or swipe right. That's the fixed mindset that's being reinforced. So we want to reinforce the growth mindset. That when I fail, I can learn from it. I can challenge myself. I can persevere. That my effort and attitude can determine my future. So what's the response repertoire of a fixed mindset? Well, it's becoming aware of what triggers a fixed mindset is the first thing. It's catching yourself in a fixed mindset. Belief that my basic qualities are rigid and fixed traits. That's a fixed mindset. That's a negative mindset. It has a paralyzing impact. It keeps you stuck. It causes to see life as a series of risky tasks and risky situations and things that are negative that happen to us, instead of focusing on what we learned from. It's focusing on the hurts. And the fixed mindset keeps us from taking risks and trying new things. It keeps us from learning from our failures. It keeps us from being resilient. So in effect, the brain is like Velcro for the negative. That's the negativity bias Rick Hansen talks about, but Teflon for positive ones. So this actually comes from an evolutionary stance. We are kind of wired and programmed for the fixed mindset because it kept us safe. It kept us from getting eaten by that saber-toothed tiger. But our world is very different from how we've evolved. And there is a negativity bias. Dr. Martin Seligman showed us that when we create a negative belief, our problem has gone from one small thing that happened once or twice to something that's permanent. It isn't going to go away. Personal, it's my fault. That's also rationalization. When we blame ourselves, we can find an instant solution to why something happened, an instant answer. And that's not healthy, but that's what we do to ourselves. And it's pervasive, all or nothing. It always turns out bad for me, or I never get that job, or I can never have a win. Well, how do you develop positive thinking? Here's another good book by Norman Doidge, The Brain That Changes Itself. Positive thinking is not something you do randomly or passively. It's a practice, just like exercise. It's a practice that you have to do daily and keep up regularly and think about. It's an active anticipation process, an active communication process with yourself, and it's an active process of reframing. By making it a daily habit, you create a positive thinking mindset that allows you to avoid potentially negative and challenging situations and helps you to resolve dilemmas quickly and easily. So this is from, I think, one of the best teachers I've ever had and great coach, Linda Wallace from WBI. She gives the care response. So this is the care response when you're falling into that negativity trap. C is for catch yourself. Notice when you're engaging in negative thought or critical self-talk. A, acknowledge it. Acknowledge what you're doing, acknowledge the negativity, acknowledge what's holding you back, recognize the pain that that negativity and self-criticism is causing you. R is for redo it. Speak gently to your inner critic and redirect your thoughts to positive reframing. E, encourage. Replace the critical self-talk with supportive self-talk. Be your own wise and caring friend when you're negative, when something doesn't work out for you. So we use this care response to foster a positive mindset. So when we find ourselves going into that old negative mode, recognize it and label it. Well, that's a negative mindset. Conversely, if you see yourself reframing and doing a positive mindset or a growth mindset, recognize that too. Hey, I just used a growth mindset. I can move on from that. Or, hey, I learned from that situation. It may not have worked out for me, but you know what? I gained experience. I was more brave than I thought. I may have made a new connection. It's all right. I'm going to grow from this. So you also can reframe it and look at it as, well, hey, I was willing to risk and grow, and I'm okay. I'm working through frustration and doubt. You have a conviction that you can develop beyond your basic abilities and learn to do things that you've not done before. And recognizing that you have a personal growth stake in it. I always tell people the best way to foster a growth mindset and positive psychology in your life is being proactive. It's not being passive. You're being proactive rather than reactive. So Linda Wallace says, sometimes change is hard because you put the brakes on. So no matter how hard you press on the gas to move forward in your life, it's hard to move on when your other foot is on the brake. So stop, look, and listen to when you're putting on the brakes in your life. Oftentimes it's about fear or self-doubt, or somebody has made a tape that you keep playing in your head, something negative about yourself, something that you've bought into, a weakness. And usually that weakness, again, stems from fear of rejection or fear of failing. You don't feel effective. Maybe you can do some self-exploration today and tomorrow and try to figure out, when do those brakes go on and what's causing me to put that foot on the brake instead of on the gas pedal. As Phoebe knows, and you know, it's the but in the sentence. I love when Maria Serrar talks about exchanging the but for the and in the sentence. The but usually puts the brakes on. Oh, I want to apply for a new job, but I don't have the skills, but I'm afraid to, venture into a new territory or venture into a new goal. I don't think I'll make it. It's that but. We see this with our kids a lot. So, are your brakes on too often? Don't let the fear be the driver. It can be in the back seat to keep you safe, but don't let it take the wheel. Try to understand what's keeping you from moving forward by understanding what's keeping you set. To make changes, we can't have the brakes on. I always like to do positive inquiry with people I work with in my coaching practice, and you can do this on your own. Ask yourself these questions. What's the positive core of yourself, of your family? What are your strengths? So many times with the wonderful programming of the JCC this year, we've talked about taking the VIA and understanding character strengths. And I encourage you to do that. Maybe Caroline can put up the link for VIA character strengths. It's free. I suggest to so many people that they take it to understand what their strengths are. Establishing positive emotions in anticipation for events, in anticipation of tasks, in anticipation of your communication. I'm going to talk about this more on Thursday, but I have a program called Shooting PAR, P-A-R, prepare, accommodate, and reframe. So you can actually prepare in advance to be positive instead of negative. That's how we're going to train our brain and train those neural networks to be more positive. Asking yourself, how can I use failure and past experiences that didn't work out for growth? And what impact do I want to have today or in this experience, in this meeting I'm going to have, in this moment? Is there a happiness formula? Yes, there is. Keep watching. You will learn the answer. SPIRE is something that WBI and the Whole Being Institute, the change model and the SPIRE model. And the way that I use SPIRE, which is a key tenet of, I believe, understanding positive psychology, I use SPIRE to move forward. That you have to have these elements in your life every day. That's the way I use it. You can use it differently. Spirituality, physical health, physical activity, intellectual growth, relationships, and emotions. So I'm going to stop it here so we can chat and chew and talk about this. Okay, so I'm just going to hand it over to Phoebe and Caroline because I want to chat and chew over this. Okay.
Awesome. Wow. So much to digest. We had a question about, let's see, weren't Abraham Maslow and Maxwell Maltz also pioneers of positive thinking psychology?
Absolutely. And so is Erich Fromm. Before it was called positive. That's, Martin Seligman did not live in a vacuum. He was a brilliant psychologist and researcher who cultivated positive psychology from the very best of existential psychology, existentialism, insight-oriented stress psychology, cognitive behavioral psychology. So yes, we're drawing on the wonderful pioneers of psychology of the 20th century to build and expand on where we're going to go with positive psychology.
Great. And Ellen says, please show change. Ellen,
the change model? Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Hold on, I will go back to that. Before we go back to change, any other questions that I should address before we go back to the
Well,
change?
you know what I was thinking would be kind of fun is if we take kind of a situation, like an everyday situation. Taxes are coming up for folks.
Oh,
right?
I love it. Yes.
And I know that for me, last night I was finishing itemizing all my receipts. And due to COVID, my bookkeeper, she usually used to come over and that wasn't possible. So now I have this collection of receipts, or had this collection of receipts. And I found myself in that situation. And maybe I'm asking if I'm not alone in this situation, where I realized I have a fixed mindset about this.
Yes.
I really feel like, oh my gosh, this isn't my expertise. Can I really do it? And I kind of tortured myself for a couple of weeks. And then when I got it done, I was like, that wasn't so hard. What was I?
Right. Right. So you just learned from that.
Right.
It's good. So when we get into like taxes, and taxes are coming up, that's a situation where there's like three things at play to explore, three things that are keeping those brakes on, your brakes on. Okay. Three things. One is fear. Am I going to get audited? Did I do something wrong? I mean, it's a real thing, right? Fear, right? Number two is anxiety. A lot of anxiety, which is fueled by the fear, right? Or I don't know how to do it, or the anxiety of it. This is really overwhelming, because it is overwhelming, especially if you see a tax form, and it's on it seems like it's like on 3-point type, it's like teeny. And then, it's this document, it's scary. You've got to cull together all your different forms. And then the third thing is procrastination. Okay. So those are the three big things I see as a psychologist with taxes. Now, an accountant's going to see something else, but I see it. So you may have done this, Caroline. So let's walk through how we're going to do it. I have to do my taxes. Well, let's do, we're going to do, we'll do our PAR and our CARE response, but, catch yourself in the negative thinking. Catch yourself thinking, oh, I'm too afraid of this. I'm overwhelmed. I am not sure how to cull all this information together. I'm afraid of making a mistake. Even write down the things you're afraid of. Catch yourself in that negativity. I've never done this before, so I'm bad at it, or I'm afraid. So catch yourself. That's it. For me, I'm using the PAR situation. So prepare. I want to prepare in advance. What do I need to feel more comfortable and confident about doing my taxes? Do I need to expand my knowledge base? Is it because I have a lack of knowledge? Is that what's keeping the brakes on? That could be. Maybe I need to hire an accountant to help me. Maybe I need to go online to TurboTax or some free services that help. The other thing in moving forward is we're going to accommodate to the stressor. That's my A in the PAR. Prepare, accommodate, refrain. Now we're going to, same thing with the CARE response. We're going to accommodate. Commit small amounts of time. Okay. Do not try to eat that elephant in one sitting. Commit small amounts of time. Do tasks that have definable components to it, that you can define the little tasks you can do. So you feel efficacy in what you're doing. Okay. So, and commit a time limit to each task. So can you commit 15 minutes? Instead of chunking out 2 hours, commit.
Yeah.
That's
this is so great, because I realized I did some of these things. One of the things that I did was say, 20 minutes. I'm going to set a timer. Just do it for 20 minutes, right? And I love that. And you guys tell me put in the chat, what is your elephant, right? Like mine happened to be sorting my taxes, my receipts, because we all have one, right? We all have something that seems insurmountable. And it reminds me, of Dan Tomasulo's work. And what I did was I set micro goals. Micro goals. And I kept thinking about, and Dan's coming back at the end of March, everybody, but I don't know if anybody was on the first call where he had this wonderful story of just wash one plate. And so I was like,
wash one plate. Exactly.
This part done, and I had, just so you know, I had like 5 spreadsheets that my bookkeeper gave me that I had to go through, right? So it was quite overwhelming when I first looked at it. And then I was like, okay, just get half of one done.
So, I was just going to say something really important in this exercise. Okay, guys, it's really important that you don't judge yourself. All right. So block out that negative Nelly in your brain. It's not about judging yourself. And I think that's sort of like the first key that will unlock your ability to make change, is to not judge yourself. Okay.
And I love that you're calling it negative Nelly, because you're also naming it and sort of lightening up about it too, because it's very human. Right?
As you know, Phoebe knows this. Caroline might have heard this story. I had, just an emotional tragedy in my life 3 years ago, Valentine's, where I was picking up my daughter from school at the time in Florida. It was Valentine's Day, and I heard on the news as I was driving to pick her up, and this was at a private school she went to. Well, we used to live in a town in the next town over from where I'm living now called Parkland, Florida. And 3 years ago on Valentine's, there was a terrible tragedy with an active shooter, and 17 people were killed in the high school. And if it were not that I had my daughter in a faith-based school that day, she would have been there. And she lost a couple of teammates. I didn't know that at the time, but all I know, it was an active shooter. And I was driving to pick her up. And I also knew that she had access to social media and her phone, and was most likely texting or communicating with kids at Parkland, at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And my husband was working down the street that day at a medical clinic. So in that moment, I had to activate my PAR, prepare, accommodate, and refrain. So as I was driving to school, as a mom and a psychologist, I prepared for the emotional onslaught, the emotions, the trauma that I was going to feel with her. And I prepared for making a positive reaction to her. I prepared in advance to be positive with my daughter instead of just reacting. I anticipated. And anticipation is a key part of effectively applying positive psychology to your day. It's not just about reacting, because you can't do that. In order to build the neural networks, you must anticipate and practice anticipating. And that's what I did. I anticipated how I wanted to react to my daughter, how I wanted to support her, how I wanted to help her reframe things down the road. So that was my story about anticipating in the bad in a traumatic event.
Well, it reminds me of what Viktor Frankl says.
Yes.
In between stimulus and response, there is that pause. And it sounds like anticipating is that pause. And you took in that moment, which I can't even imagine. Right?
Yeah. And but that's what you did. And it was, I always say this, moments won't last forever, but your reactions, if they're positive, can last a lifetime. What you're modeling for your loved ones, modeling for your children, or modeling for even for your adult children, it's going to last a lifetime. Your attitude is more important than anything you can say. Your reaction's really important.
But unpack this a little bit, Sherry, because in terms of like happyology, how is there a difference between anticipation and pretending?
That's a great question. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, pretending's not rooted in reality. Pretending's denial. I did my dissertation on hopefulness and future orientation in kids who were kids and young adults who were the first generation to survive what was a fatal disease. Their life expectancy was 13 when we started this longitudinal study. And then thanks to advances in medicine, they now had a life expectancy that was going to bring them into adulthood. And so very much so, we explored the role of hopefulness and future orientation. And it wasn't about denial. It wasn't fantasy. They had real life expectations for goals and real life expectations about positive things in their future. And it really was about your ability to take reality and look at it in a positive way, a way of growth. It's how you interpret a situation. And practicing for positivity means I'm going to anticipate a negative situation today, and this is how I want to react to it. Now, we can't change our emotions, but we can manage our reactions. This is not about denying your emotions or invalidating them. It's learning how to better manage your reactions in a more positive way, and how to reframe the negative into the positive, because that's going to move you forward.
Yeah.
Let's just, go ahead.
So let's make it, because here you are a parent in this situation, right? You're triggered, and there were some questions about, like, how did you react to your child and how did you do that? And of course, it was Viktor Frankl, everyone, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, that I was referring to. So here you are in this moment, and here are your choices. What would be a normal reaction, but not necessarily the best one that you could have chosen? And what would be the one that you sort of said, wait a second, I'm going to anticipate that I might react that way, and I'm going to react this way instead?
Mm-hmm. Well, a negative one would have been, I would have joined with the anger and the trauma, and, probably had a litany of swear words for the assailant, who did this. And, or I would have joined in the tears and the fear, and I would have played upon, the fear of, oh my God, did you hear from Joni or Sally or Jake? And I would have fueled the fear and the fire and the anger. And that was not going to be productive. That would not help my child heal. Okay. Mm-hmm. Instead, it was gratitude that you're safe. Okay. Mm-hmm. Gratitude for the strength you showed to my daughter. I'm grateful for the strength and grace you have showed. It was understanding that we must show love and support to the friends that were in the school, and then activate behavioral activation. What can we do to show our love and support for these families?
This is beautiful.
That is what we did, and there's something that, and I'm sorry I didn't go through this, and I will on Thursday. There's something that's very much tied into the change model and the SPIRE model and all of this that's in positive psychology, and it's called PERMA. Right? And you guys probably know this. You guys are all experts by now in positive psychology after this year. But this is what PERMA is. Help me if I forget anything. Okay. Positive emotions, right? P is for positive emotions. I promise you I will have this slide on Thursday, but right now I'll just give you a little appetizer. Positive emotions. E is for engagement, right? We're going to find the things that make you happy and engaged. You're an active participant. You're not passive. Positive relationships is the R, right? M is make meaning of the situation. And then A is your sense of accomplishment, okay? Savor what you did. Savor your accomplishment. Savor how well you survived that trauma, and strive for future achievement.
So if we go back to why this was not pretending, and the example that you gave made it very, very clear that there are options. There are other options to turn our attention to in that moment.
You have a choice.
That are real. That are real and authentic. And you're absolutely right to say.
I'm not saying that what I did, there's no right or wrong way. I did what I felt was the best fit for myself and my child. And knowing that, what did I want to cultivate from this experience? Mm-hmm. What was my meaning and purpose? I call it purpose-driven parenting. What was my meaning and purpose of this situation? Find meaning. So I extracted meaning before I even got to my kid, which you can do.
Yeah.
I want my child to know love and support. I want her to see that her mom is strong and resilient. I want to model resiliency and grace. I want to model positive coping. Mm-hmm. And that can be your due north on the compass. Okay.
Beautiful. I want to go back to the chat for a second, because we did ask everyone to sort of put in what their, sort of instigators for fixed mindset are. And there's some great contributions here. I use different strategies to justify my fixed mindset, says Fabio. This task is boring to me. thus I don't want to learn about it, though I know it's important. And then Christina says procrastinating. Robin says her email inbox. Lori says, I have a Schedule C to fill up today, so this is perfect. Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffries was recommended by Eliza. And then Susan says, same, taxes. My brother does mine every year and suddenly suggested I do it this year. With no pandemic, doing my will and a million other things. This came out of the blue and it was overwhelming for me. Cleaning my closet and my apartment is Joanne's overwhelmed. Trying to get a COVID vaccine locally for a senior in Pittman County is mine. Clearing my car of ice. It is covered in ice now. It's taxes is a great one. Getting a vaccine appointment, packing for a long trip, stressing over getting my FedEx medication in time during bad weather. Sure. Doing laundry, cleaning, ugh. Have there been any articles or work about the use of positive psychology in the job search process? And then there was a bunch of response around Susan Peppercorn and Dina Denise Riedman, who has been a prior speaker.
Yes.
And then just being generally overwhelmed by paperwork. So we can see that the point of this, everyone, is that we're going to encounter situations, whether they be traumatic and intense, like the one that you encountered with your daughter with the Parkland shooting, or the ones that in New York we encountered with 9/11 or Hurricane Sandy. We're encountering these things every day, and resiliency is about saying that is true, and as you were saying, assessing it, right? And making a choice and getting into action.
Right.
So.
And there's a way to practice for all. I mean, there's some little exercises you can do on this. And first, remember to observe, but don't judge yourself. Observe, but don't judge. Okay. I like this. And this is sort of like, if you're going to join me on Thursday, the first exercise is try not to say anything negative for 24 hours. And that causes, and you have to anticipate. See, there's a method to my madness. That's why I asked you to do that exercise, because you're going to have to anticipate not to have a negative, not to say something negative. You can have a negative feeling. I'm just saying, don't say it. Okay. Now the next
so you
thing
can
is
think it. Wait, let's get the rules clear. Anybody else be an
you can
overachiever
think
about
it,
your
but
homework?
don't say it for the homework. Just don't say anything negative.
Don't
Okay?
say anything negative.
Right.
Okay, you can think it, but you can't say it. Right.
And then think about the negative. How can you reframe it? What did you learn from it?
Okay.
What did this teach you? What insights? Okay.
This is going to be fun.
Now, here's the next thing. This is a daily practice that I love to do. It's great. Write just 3 things. You don't have to go do a big journaling thing because that's hard for a lot of people. Just write down 3 things that went well today and what you did to make that happen. 3 things that went well and what you did to make that happen.
Okay, would it be helpful, everybody, if I wrote this in the chat for you?
All right.
I see some nodding heads.
So write down 3 things that went well and what you did to make it happen. This is all, exercise for your neural networks. This is training your brain to be more positive, or I call it coding for positivity.
This reminds me of Jill Bolte Taylor's work, My Stroke of Insight. And if anybody has read that book or has seen her TED Talk, and one of the things that she talks about in relationship to the neural networks is that because she had that stroke, right, she was not able to remember sort of her negative, if you want to call them negative, relationships or tendencies with her mom. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And after 8 years, after she recovered, she realized that she could reactivate those negative networks or not, and she chose not to.
One of the books I love to recommend on this topic, which I just think is great at understanding how to apply positive psychology in the real world, is Flourish by Martin Seligman.
Beautiful. Okay, I'll put that in the chat
Yeah,
too.
Flourish by Martin. A visionary new understanding of happiness and well-being.
Great. Well, anyone have a question for Sherry, Dr. Kelly?
Someone wanted me to put the change up, and so I will. I'm going to go to share screen and put that up while we're still talking, okay?
And then I'm going to look up.
I don't want to disappoint.
Yes, yes, of course. And I want to.
Change to facilitate growth. Well, we're going to go over this on Thursday, but just give you a little heads up. C is for clarify, create clear and heartfelt forward-looking goals for positive change. H is for hope. Explore strengths and resources to fuel your hopefulness and optimism. The A is for activate. We talked a lot about that today. Activate the change process with immediate positive action. Create an adaptable big picture map of the path to goal achievement. That's the N, that's the navigating. G is go for it. Make rapid, substantial, sustainable progress towards your goals. And then E is broaden the impact by expanding on the positive changes to other areas. So learn from your success in this and broaden and build.
Awesome. And I put in Jill Bolte, it's Bolte, not Bolte, Taylor, TED Talk.
Oh, good. Thank you. So if you guys have any questions or want to connect with me, please go to my website, mindandheartcoaching.com. That's with an A-N-D, mindandheartcoaching.com. You can connect with me through my website. That's really easy. And you can also get to me at Sherry@mindandheartcoaching.com, SHERRY, Sherry@mindandheartcoaching.com. If you have any questions or would like me to address something on Thursday.
Yeah, please let us know. And once again, wow, this was just sort of chock full of information that is both useful and a new perspective. Speaking of neuroplasticity, which I know is one of the topics that you love to talk about, we're not the same after this conversation.
I hope
Sherry.
not.
And
I want you guys to
that.
put this to work. I really want you to try this out for the next couple of days. Let me know what happens on Thursday. But, start thinking about preparing in advance. I want to prepare in advance. Like, even if it's something as mundane as, I'm going to go to the grocery store, and there's going to be, no room at the checkout counter, and I have to go in a long line, because that always happens to me. Do not ever be behind me, because it's going to be a long line. Okay. And how am I going to react? Am I going to be annoyed? And I'm going to be frustrated? I'm going to be tapping my feet, huffing and puffing. Ugh. How can I react differently today?
I was even thinking of, I'm going to get my vaccine, right? How am I going to react? Or I'm going to drive on the highway and somebody's going to cut me off. How am I going to react, right? Those are great anticipatory.
There you go. Now you're going to start thinking differently. All right?
Yeah. Well, this is great. Let's all just take a moment, and I'm going to take us all off spotlight, and let's say a goodbye in one of my favorite ways to say goodbye, and that is to have everybody put on gallery view, and then we're going to say, you're going to turn, when I say yes, turn to the person on the right of you and say goodbye, turn to the person on your left, above and below, and just all at the same time, so we get to hear each other's voices. So go ahead and unmute.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, Barbara.
Bye, Andrea. Bye, Evelyn.
See you on Thursday. See you next Thursday. We'll be
Bye, Esther. Bye, Deb. Hey, Mitch.
Bye,
enjoy
Caroline.
this sunny day.
Bye, Sherry.
Have an amazing
Donna.
day.
Bye.
Bye, Phyllis.
Bye, Sherry. Bye,
Bye,
Caroline.
Evelyn. Bye,
So much,
Ellen.
Sherry.
Great.
Bye, Barbara.
Bye, Barbara.
I feel
Bye,
like I'm with all of you.
Jason.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.